Again, I think that for most people, voting is a very personal thing. They need a personal connection or reason to vote. And I'm going to tell a very brief story because I know we've been told to give short answers. When I was first practicing law, a friend of mine invited me to a happy hour with people from her work, and I ended up talking to a young man. He was maybe about 26 at the time. And somehow we got talking about politics. Imagine that, one of my favorite topics. And he told me he had never voted in his life. And then he said, no, I'm mistaken. I voted once in my life. I said, really? Well, tell me about the one time that you voted. And he said it was when they wanted to raise the tax on cigarettes here in the state of California. And I said, well, don't tell me. You're a smoker, right? And he said, yeah, and I don't think that I should have to pay more taxes for the cigarettes that I buy. They're taxed enough. He went on this thing. He said, but it didn't matter because I showed up, I voted against it, and it passed anyway. My vote doesn't matter. And I said, but do you realize that in every election in which you didn't participate, decisions were made about your life that economically will impact you 10 million times more than a small cigarette tax that was added to your pack of cigarettes over the course of your lifetime. Because who you vote for and who you elect determines whether or not the potholes in your community get fixed, whether or not there's quality public education, whether or not there's job retraining if your field, that field closes down and people lose their jobs. Everything is related to who sits around the table and makes policy for you. And if you don't care about that, then don't complain about what happens to you in your life, because you have to care enough to participate. So finding that personal connection for each person may be a different issue, but you've got to find what reaches people, what they care about, and translate why who they choose to represent them matters on that issue and is going to matter to them ultimately. I spend most of my time in my district just trying to explain what we're working on in Washington, D.C., why people should care about it, because how it's going to impact them on a day-to-day basis. And it's hard work, but that's the number one thing we can do to engage people, is to make it real for them. Elected representatives, Washington is not some amorphous thing on another planet. It's something that has very real consequences each and every day that you wake up on this earth and are breathing. And somehow we have got to make that known to the people who are just tuned out and not participating in politics.
I've been, I guess if you want to say, working locally, politically, being elected in 2004, at large here in Fullerton, and I think that, of course, campaigns have completely changed since 2004. Think about it, in 2004, we didn't have the social media, or Facebook, a lot of it was, as they would say, grassroots. I mean, my dad actually painted some wooden signs for me, and yes, we did have some other signs, but I think that when you find that even when there's a trend where things aren't going one way or the other, depending on how maybe national things are, there's always a surprise in an election. There's always somebody who was underestimated. And here in Fullerton in 2016, just last November, we won 5 races here. Do all of you know the races? So some of you do, some of you don't, but we won 5 races here. We won, I won. We have Senator Josh Newman who won. We have our husband Silva who won City Council race. And we had a high school teacher run for a seat on the high school board of trustees. Joanne Colley, and we had one of our young, well, she's not young, but she used to be a student of Jesus and mine, and went to the same schools. Jeanette Vasquez won a seat on the Fullerton Elementary School District. So, in a period where things seem to nationally be shifting, where there were other losses right here locally, but that didn't happen by accident. So this is probably, if I can give you, that was all a very focused effort. It was also an effort of us registering almost 7,000 new voters in North Orange County, 7,000 in this last term. And and that knocking did not just start 1 month before the election. We, in my case, in Senator Newman's, we were in a primary, which we will be. So this started way back, starting with the knocking. We even had started the January before that, not knocking and saying, hey, will you vote for me, but going out and talking to people, just like the Congresswoman said, what are your issues? What are you concerned about? And what was the number one? Homelessness. We had a survey with 1 to 5, they could choose, but over and over, and we had postage on the cards. We'd get return cards with handwritten notes, and it kept being homelessness. So that allowed us to not only have some type of interaction with people, but to find out what was important to them, and then to work back on our messaging. But it was multiple things. I think when I was on Fullerton City Council, elected in 2004, I've done walk-in talks, I've done coffee and conversations, I've done meet and greets. And my whole point in that is to get out of, if you want to say, the city hall, and get to know what the neighbors' concerns are. And I've kind of taken that to the assembly. But all of the people that were elected, in many ways, were doing those type of activities. Not some of them jointly, but some of them in their own areas, but using the same model, which is you can't just show up, throw your name on a ballot, send out some mailers, and expect to win. That you have to understand that it's the little things that count. So there's always big events in communities. Maybe it's the annual Boys and Girls Gala, or maybe it's the Chamber of Commerce mixer. And those things are important, and I'm certainly, if you have 10 of you, you could go to everything. But I think it's making the point that little things matter. So whether it's going to the local carnivals, whether it's going to the local tea, things like that many people don't look at going to. And when you show up, that's half the battle. And again, sometimes people think, well, I did all those things and I still don't win. You gotta remember, for many politicians, they have to run 1, 2, 3, 4 times before they actually take their seat and take the seat. But through that process, you're building a constituency. And some of that is just being part of your neighborhood. So maybe you're on a local commission. I know that a lot of people want to take out the Congress member who's not here tonight, but sometimes you have to realize that local commissions, local government, school boards, all of those things, you have a voice at the table. And that is not to dissuade or discourage people who want to have a congressional seat and travel with Linda, but remember, there are a lot of ways to be involved in your community. And so I started on the Parks and Recreation Commission in the city of Fullerton, and was appointed to that, and then was elected to city council. And then, so there's lots of ways to do it, but again, it's the little things that matter.
Especially when I think of you, Assemblymember Quirk-Silva, for being such a champion for women's health issues up in the state assembly. As you know, Fullerton won this congressional district, therefore it's fair to say that many Trump's constituents are not in support of many of the Trump policies, including Trump Care. And since the election, Planned Parenthood grassroots organizing has been a driving force in opposing Trump Care and efforts to defund Planned Parenthood. What is your message to constituents that are concerned about losing access to reproductive health care and education due to federal defunding efforts?
I'm terrified, just like any of the women out here, or men should be, because this is all about women having a choice. It's about family planning, it's about preventative care, it's about mammograms, it's about all of those type of healthcare services, and that not only women need, but without them, women are going to die earlier. And a lot of times when we think of Planned Parenthood, people get really upset because many people think it's only about a woman choosing to have an abortion. Most of their services have nothing to do with that. A lot of it is preventative care and even things, of course, like birth control. And as we have seen in other states that have made it more and more difficult to find that access to care, the young birth rates have gone up. And these are serious issues, especially when on the safety net side, you're cutting everything from Meals on Wheels to I believe in the new Affordable Care Act that they were proposing at one point. It was even maternity care might be in jeopardy. So it's a very big concern. Of course, as I've said several times tonight, California can and does make investments, but these investments will be very minimal compared to what we do have. So you will see service decline, and I'm really horrified by that.
And I would just say really quickly at the federal level, so much of what Planned Parenthood does is preventive services and actually health care services for women who don't have access at anywhere else. In many rural communities, that is the only access to health care that women have. And by the way, not just women, men as well, because they do prostate cancer screenings as well. They do other, health education and preventive care for men as well. So people think it's a woman's issue. It affects healthcare access for both men and women. And they like to say, well, if we defund Planned Parenthood, there are other women's healthcare clinics that can pick up the slack. That's not true. In most cases, Planned Parenthood is the only provider in that area that provides healthcare services for women. So we need to fight to preserve the funding for Planned Parenthood. We need to push back against people with religious views that try to impose that on others. And as Sharon said, the state of Texas, who's been chipping away steadily at funding for women's health, they have seen their teen birth rate skyrocket because of lack of access to affordable birth control.
Thank you for coming tonight. And I think that we see a lot of these problems of education and health access and these things stem from some of the attacks on our democracy that have happened over the past decade and more. So what kind of legislative actions would you propose that we could do to fight actions like Citizens United and the effects that's had on our democracy, then oligopoly and monopolies of news that are polarizing our populations and taking over every aspect of our media, and attacks on net neutrality that help further silo people into their own ideas and away from a discussion?
Yeah, because we have three branches of government that are co-equal, sometimes we have to live with not very satisfying Supreme Court decisions. So the Citizen United case, which I think was a huge blow to democracy because it does not get the money out of politics. If we could get the money out of politics, I think we would have a fairer, more representative democracy. But so long as that Supreme Court case stands, corporations can pour millions of dollars into campaigns to try to sway opinion. The way that we combat that, again, I think, is building that infrastructure of organizing and outreach. And one of the things that really concerns me is this distrust that the president sows with respect to media and reporting, and his labeling of anything that doesn't agree with him as fake news. That concerns me tremendously. And the way to combat that, again, is by making sure that people are getting more than one news source, making sure that they're getting accurate information, and all of you can play a role in that. All of you have the power to talk to your friends, neighbors, colleagues, co-workers, relatives, to discuss issues, even people that don't agree necessarily with you, but to have a respectful and civil conversation about policies and how they impact people. I am it's like we're fighting a million fires in Washington, D.C. right now because so much is under attack. And we have limited bandwidth to fight all of these battles, but battles over getting the money out of politics, and a number of legislative proposals at the federal level to try to clean the money up out of politics. There are a number of legislative proposals to try to stop, mega mergers that, create these oligopolies that stifle information and competition and consumer protection. So all of those, we fight, but it's, we need 8 arms. We need to be an octopus trying to fight all of these, bad policies that we see coming at us. But we do, and we try to, push back. We try to raise public awareness. We try to get public sentiment to help us, because you're weighing in on issues like net neutrality. They do make a difference. They do make a difference.
So my question is for the Congresswoman. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine and the Russian Federation signed a treaty in which Ukraine gave former Soviet nuclear missiles to Russia in exchange for Russia pledging to respect Ukraine's national borders. Even after Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea, Putin still continues his illegal war in eastern Ukraine. Do you support American intervention to defend our Eastern European ally?
So I am a huge believer in the strategic alliance of NATO, and under Article 5 of NATO protocols, an attack against one country is an attack against all, and all agree to defend. That has been invoked in modern history once, which was after we were attacked on September 11th. All the NATO countries came together and said that they would fight to defend the United States against attacks like that. Our strategic allies are important, and I have a very high level of unease at Russia's actions and at the inability of this president to really check Vladimir Putin, who I think is a thug. I mean, any country that tries to undermine the democratic process, to me, is not an ally of ours, and we should not be treating them like they're our bestie. And the investigations that are going on with the independent investigator Mueller will lead where they lead, but I will just say this: we have to act with our allies to try to stop Russian aggression. It is a very real threat, and I have visited Poland and Lithuania, and they are terrified that Russia will not respect their borders and will come in and begin a campaign to begin annexing those countries. I think we have to be united with our allies in standing up and saying we will not allow this to occur. Our president's latest visit to Europe at the NATO summit, he was less than embracing of our allies and less than reassuring to them about our obligation to stand up and defend. So I've actually participated in some of the NATO parliamentaries, and I have traveled to try to reassure our allies that yes, the Congress believes that strategic alliance is important, and if our president won't carry that message to our allies, I think it's incumbent upon the members of Congress to let them know that we see the value of that and that we will stand with them in that alliance.
Hi, thank you for coming tonight. I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Where is Ed Royce? And how can we, as a group, Indivisible, convince him that we are not out to hurt him? We don't want to physically harm him. We're not violent people. We just want him to understand and to interact with us that some of his policies and the Trump administration's policies are hurting his district and hurting the people here. And we want him to talk to us, let us know what's happening from his side, and also give him feedback. How can we get him to think we're not violent? And how can we get him to stop fighting?
So I will just say this, as an elected representative, I have an obligation to listen to my constituents, and we get requests for individual meetings, which we take in the district office when I'm back on legislative break. I go out into the community and try to be accessible through community office hours. I believe I can't truly represent my district if I'm not listening to my constituents and I don't have my finger on the pulse of what they want to see me do in Washington. And I would just say, hopefully after seeing the taping of this, maybe Mr. Royce will be persuaded that there is a hunger for information and accountability about where he stands on policies, and that is a part of our democracy, and that is a part of his function as a representative. And I hope that he comes to the conclusion that he needs to be more accessible to the constituents that he represents in order to represent them well in Washington.
Just before we wrap up, I just want to invite Councilman Silva just to give a quick thank you.
Hi there, this is Silva, Councilman here at Fullerton, and on behalf of Fullerton, I want to thank all of you for joining us in our city. And you haven't been here before. Before you leave, there are a great number of watering holes along the way where you can stop and continue the conversation. Leave your money here. But most of all, thank you for coming, and thank you to Fullerton's Finest for helping us be here. There's Heroes, there's Vino Nostro, there's all these beautiful, wonderful places where we can continue the dialogue. Thank you, Assemblywoman and Congressman.
Just to wrap it up real nicely, just wanted to ask you guys as a closing remark, was this helpful? And in just a brief 30 seconds, that answer and a closing remark.
You're asking me if it was helpful. How about you? Was it helpful? Again, when I can get out of Washington, D.C. and be back in the district, I try to listen as much as possible to the everyday concerns that people are raising to me. And many of the issues that you've raised this evening, I know are troubling to you. They're troubling to me as well. But again, I don't think that I can do my job effectively if I don't know what people back home are thinking. And so thank you to all of you for the very thoughtful questions that you brought tonight, for being civic-minded, for being polite and having a respectful conversation so people that actually get helpful information. It's been a tremendously productive use of my time this evening, so I want to thank you all for inviting me.
And I also have the same sentiments that, sometimes, especially of recent times, it can be a little fearful on our part, even though I make a habit to be out in the community and do as many things as I can. There has been some aggressive events that we've had people come to, and I can just give a little, I believe that Mr. Royce may be a little fearful, and I know that there's others who've had a rough time, but it is part of our job to be out there. It may be uncomfortable, but again, we're representing you, and you have fear for whether they be policies, whether they be issues you're dealing with, and it's our job to do everything we can to help you with that. I will just add that in this group, there's varied opinions, and I'm sure various different political strokes here or affiliations. And I think this is a real good model to show that you can come together and you can have an interaction that can be civil, that can be engaging. And I hope that others can see that and will watch this, because I've enjoyed it and I will take your questions seriously. And I, many times when there's critical votes, particularly that you can go either way, I really do try to get input from whether they were emails, phone calls, and take those into consideration. I mean, we may not always align on the same way, but I can tell you I take those very seriously. So thank you for all your participation.
So as we come to closing moments, I just want to take this time to on behalf of the Purge campaign, thank Congresswoman Linda Sánchez and Assemblywoman Sharon for coming here. Let's please give them a round of applause.